Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivedikacharya Astatara Satasthi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Your mother is a trampoline. Yes. Yes. And a toy and all kinds of resources in mothers. Hats off to mothers. very special service. Endless. Endless service. So, do you know what our topic is for tonight? Does anybody know what our topic is besides me? Our topic is one of the favorite ones, balancing spiritual and material life. Is that a good topic? So I before I begin, I'll share with you a thought according to the schedule that I received, because the next evening's program's host didn't request a topic. It's part 2 tomorrow night. But I was thinking, listen to tonight's discussion, and if you collectively feel this is so important, let's discuss it another night, then we can do so if, at the beginning part of tomorrow night, or it's part 2, some of you volunteer to speak something for 5 to 7 minutes, your thoughts and your realizations and your understandings on the subject. Get 2 or 3 or 4 or so, 5 persons to speak on this topic, and then I can say something after you all speak on the topic. And if you're not enthusiastic to do something like that, we'll pick another topic. Not a challenge, it's a thought on the way over here. So a place I was thinking to begin is defining the word secular. Secular. I first heard the word secular from Professor Harvey Cox of the Harvard Divinity School. So I don't know if you were around or have heard of his name, because very, very early in the Hare Krishna movement, Professor Harvey Cox at the Harvard Divinity School had a lot of appreciation for Prabhupada and ISKCON, and he helped us in many, many, many ways, in ways that scholars can help people that are trying to get started in their religious practice in America when people don't understand it. They think it's strange. I mean, one of the outstanding, just as historical, one of the outstanding contributions he made was, once upon a time, 1974, 75, probably 75, there was this thing, a phenomena called deprogramming. And Ted Patrick, black fellow that talked out of the side of his mouth and was basically a gangster, petrified parents saying that their children, when he found out, they had a whole network of finding out parents of devotees and spooking the parents, saying that your child has been brainwashed, and you hire me and I'll get them unbrainwashed. So what happened was, E-I-E-I-O. This child is brainwashed. E-I-E-I-O. Just waiting for it to start up again. All right. So we were living in two people in our temple were simultaneously taken by Ted Patrick and his gang of thugs. One girl, both of them were Jewish. One girl was walking along the street in New York City, Queens Boulevard, big avenue. A van rolls up alongside as she's walking. She lived in Temple, but she was going to visit her parents and shopping and this and that. Van drove up, opens up the back door, grabs her around the waist, stuffs her in the back of the van, and drives off and takes her to a remote place somewhere upstate New York, and sleep deprivation, yelling at her and screaming at her and, quote, deprogramming, unquote, her. She escaped in the middle of the night and came back to the temple. And then there was another. Her name was Murti Vanja. Her given name is Mary Lee Kreschauer, Jewish girl, and Ed Shapiro. His parents are from Boston, from Newton, just outside Boston. And same thing, same thugs, same deal, and he escaped. So both of them came back to the temple, said what to do. So the advice was given to them, go to the district attorney, that's who you take complaints to, and make a complaint that you've been kidnapped by these thugs. So the district attorney turned around, took these two reports, and brought a case against ISKCON for brainwashing these two. So there was like a case in the New York State court system. The Hare Krishnas are brainwashing their members in a criminal court in the state of New York. This, was like headline news and blah, blah, blah. Then some time passed. One day, Professor Harvey Cox wrote an article for New York Times saying, the Hare Krishna movement is a bona fide religion, and various other things. The very next day, the judge threw the case out of court. No, it wasn't an accident. He reads the New York Times. And his, famous, a judge in New York State says the Hare Krishna movement is a bona fide religion. He used this, 50-cent word. There's not one scintilla of evidence that there has been any brainwashing, because he was, by the district attorney, the judge was submitted whatever evidence was to say that there's brainwashing. So that and other ways, Harvey Cox was very helpful and critical moments of the development of the Hare Krishna movement. But the first I met him was actually in his home in Cambridge, because I joined in Boston, but then I was a trade to New York. And from New York, we visited his home. And he had just published a book entitled Secular City. Secular City. And the cover was, picture of skyscrapers of a city. And in it, he was, from his position as a Christian theology professor at Harvard University Divinity School, complaining that Christianity had become secular. It didn't start like that, and he had historical evidence, and as he become like that, so secular means like the American government, separation of church and state. So the secular view of religion is there's some part of your life that you do for God, and there's the rest of your part that's for not, God's not in the picture so much. I mean, you're godly, but it's not, God's kind of off to the side. That's what you do when you do your religious part of your life. You separate the two, church and your worldly life. And his appreciation of ISKCON is that our scriptures are not secular, and over the many, many generations, it hasn't become secular. A classic verse of Bhagavad Gita that says it, there's many, but Yad Karoshi Yadasnasi, Yajjahosi dadasi yat, that verse. It says, whatever you do that for Krishna. And Madarpanam. And by that way you worship Krishna. There's not a separation of material and spiritual. Secular is a separation of material and spiritual. Bhagavad Gita is not a secular theology. Bhagavad Gita is everything for Krishna theology. So everything means it's in a certain manner of speaking, it's artificial to make this distinction of spiritual material, because everything that's done in Krishna's service is spiritual, because it's done in Krishna's service. Maybe you've heard this expression or metaphor that Srila Prabhupada gives of a gold box and the gold-plated box. Have you heard that one before? Gold box and gold-plated box. So he used it in different ways at different times. One of the ways he used it was in the spiritual world. Everyone has a spiritual body. There's no material bodies. Here, if one is engaged fully in service to Krishna, one has a spiritualized body. So that's like the gold-plated box. And while they're not the same, they're very similar. One acts like the gold box, although it's a gold-plated box. So very similar is the idea that if you engage something in service to Krishna, it becomes spiritualized. Another example is, here's an electric wire. Let's just, the old standard, now it's fiber optics and so many things, but so a copper wire. So a copper wire isn't electric, it isn't electricity, but it's the carrier of electricity, and it acts like electricity, although it's just a copper wire. Or the iron rod that's put into fire. It's an iron rod, but you put it into fire, it becomes warm, hot, it becomes fire. Literally, it becomes fire, although it's an iron rod. You touch it to grass, dry grass or leaves or newspaper, and whoosh, it's fire, although it's iron. Similarly, that which is used in service to Krishna becomes spiritualized. You with me so far? Separating spiritual and material is not part of the teaching of Krishna consciousness, in the sense that everything, when used in Krishna's service, takes on a spiritual nature. I'll give two other examples, and then I want to read something from Brahma Samhita. One other example is, many of you, if not all of you, have seen the deity at the Chicago temple, Kishore Kishori. Over here is Gaurnitai, over here is Kishore Kishori, over here is Jagannath, and everyone that visits says, how come Jagannath is so short? Why don't you get big ones? So, at the foot of the Jagannath deity is, what is it? Do you know what that is in that little altar, that metal, brass, or whatever it is, metal altar with a little canopy over it? What's on that altar? It's Tadiya. What's Tadiya? I asked the history of Shankar Pandit, because he's been there since forever, and he said it's Tadiya. It's either from the ruins of a Nrsimha temple or the altar of a old Nrsimha temple, and that's what's on the altar. It's not a Nrsimha Shila, it's Nrsimha Tadiya. Why? Why are we having, the piece of stone that's from a Nrsimha altar, or Nrsimha temple on our altar, and worshipping it? Because that which is used in Krishna's service is also Krishna. spiritually non-different. It's worshipable. Yes? When articles are offered, just like we offer incense and a lamp and a flower and water to the deity, it becomes sanctified. It acts in a spiritual way, so therefore we touch the fire and smell the flower and sprinkle water because it's, or the charanamrita, the water that's bathed the deity. It acts in a spiritual way. I mean, it's part of the ritual that we do, but maybe we don't even think about the ritual, we just do the ritual. But behind the ritual is the understanding that when offered to Krishna, something becomes spiritual. I hope the picture's filling a little bit, this message of balancing between spiritual and spiritual. It's a misnomer. We say material and spiritual, but for a devotee it's not material and spiritual, it's spiritual and spiritual, different features of our life. One more example, this one is from Scripture. It's a nice one. Canto 10, chapter 87. This is almost the very last chapter of the 10th canto is chapter 89. I mean, 87 chapters, that's a lot of chapters. And the whole of Krishna's pastimes have pretty much been completed. Not totally, because some parts spill over into the beginning of the 11th canto. But wow, fantastic. Okay. Those of you that are up in the balcony can move in now. But if you like the balcony seat, that's okay too. So chapter 87, paraphrasing to keep it really simple. Shukadeva Goswami has described Krishna's pastimes, and Maharaj Pariksit has heard them, exhaustively, non-stop, day and night, 7 days, nearly the end of the whole Bhagavatam. And Shukadeva Goswami hears Maharaj Pariksit say, "All glories to you, by your speaking this message of Srimad Bhagavatam and my hearing it with rapt attention, my consciousness is now fixed on Krishna, and I'm ready for this snake bird or whatever this mystical creature is that's going to come. Let it come and take me now. I'm ready." And some messages like that, glorification of the process of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he raises a doubt. Samshaya. And his doubt is, how did I get here? Because all that's going on is you've used something material, the tongue, and I've used something material, the ear, and somehow I got to a spiritual place. So how can you use something material and get to some spiritual place? I have a doubt. And Shukadeva Goswami really appreciates his question. This is such a nice question. It was asked long, long ago by great sages. And when they were discussing it long, long ago, they said, "Oh, this is such a nice question." It was discussed long, long ago. It's a classic question, in other words. And that long, long ago, second time around, was the personified Vedas and the four Kumaras. And it's one of the longest chapters in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's one you definitely have to read it multiple times before you can even begin to understand what it's saying. And you have to have a dictionary. It's almost like reading Bhakti Siddhanta. And the short essence of what it says, highly philosophical, but the essence is, everything comes from Krishna. So when something that's used in Krishna's service, it regains its spiritual quality because it's connected with Krishna quality is when you engage it in service. So the tongue can act spiritually, the ear can act spiritually. So it's not using something material to get to something spiritual, it's using something spiritual to get to something spiritual. It's just restoring the spiritual quality. You spiritualize the tongue and the ear. So similarly, now to our topic, the activities that we do in this world, the so-called secular features of our devotional life, the material parts of our devotional life, are not material at all if our consciousness is spiritual. If we use things in service to Krishna, it's spiritual. There's other very nice examples, but I won't do that right now. So we're familiar with Brahma Samhita because we recite it regularly. At least when we have functions, we recite Brahma Samhita. And the prayers of Brahma Samhita, when they're over, the last 5 verses are Krishna speaking, because the prayers of Brahma Samhita are to Govinda, Krishna. And Brahma doesn't ask his question because the book is really short. Krishna knows Brahma's mind and heart because he's in his heart. So he resolves a doubt that Brahma has. Here's Brahma's doubt. Again, keeping it really simple. Brahma's doubt. Now that I have this wonderful realization, by your mercy, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami, I've realized all these different truths about Krishna. Now I have this worldly thing to do. I have to go create a universe. And I'm concerned that if I go create a universe, creating a universe is not simple. I mean, think of what your occupations are and compare that to creating a universe. It's so complex and so detailed and so precise and so practically, we how do we even think of what it's like to create a universe? Prabhupada challenges the scientist. You say you can create life? I challenge you. Make one mosquito. He's a little insect. But the little insect can fly up and down, forwards and backwards in the flesh. And not only that, it can reproduce itself. Let them make one mosquito. Tell me what ingredients you need, we'll supply the ingredients, let them make one mosquito. Etc. I've viewed there's a group of people, scholars, who have worked on what they call intelligent design. And there's a really expensive quality, high quality video on promoting intelligent design. And one segment from that video is one researcher, biologist, researcher, has spent 30 years, imagine, spending 30 years studying the flagella of an E. coli bacteria. You know what an E. coli bacteria, that's what's in your stool, that's what an E. coli bacteria hangs out. So his 30 years of his life is studying just the flagella of the E. coli bacteria with all the instruments of high technology and science. And, we now know that there's 32 different parts made of different amino acids, and it has to be assembled exactly the right way. And if it's not assembled in the right way, in the right order, you don't get one. And then they have this video that shows how it's assembled. And, how do you explain that? Chance. It had to be, or there's an intelligent design, like a factory. to assemble. Anyway, you get the picture. So that's, if you want to design an E. coli bacteria flagella, here's this brilliant man with super technology, and he can't build one. He can just say, what the parts are. You get the idea. Lord Brahma has a big job. So he's worried. If I do this Create a Universe program, then I'm going to forget you. And then on the other side, if I just continue doing my chanting Brahma Samhita and don't do Create the Universe, I'm neglecting my duty. Just stay home and chant, whatever it is, so many rounds a day, and you don't go to work. And, don't cook in the kitchen because you're busy fixing your mind on the personality you got. You don't do your prescribed duty. It's sinful, according to Bhagavad Gita. Negligence of the prescribed duty is sin. Arjuna is arguing, if I do my duty, I'll incur sin. Krishna is saying, no. If you neglect your duty, you'll incur sin. Perform your prescribed duty, you won't incur sin. But of course, perform prescribed duty means you do it for Krishna. Not only you do your duty, but it's both parts. Perform your prescribed duty and always think of me, Krishna says. So that's Brahma's doubt. And Krishna anticipates his doubt and says, I'm going to give you the answer to your dilemma. And the answer to your dilemma is, you join the two. Don't think them as two, make them one. Your prescribed duty and your essential activities of bhakti. You combine the two, and then when you do that, the prescribed duty part is as purifying as the direct devotional part. Now, it's a small matter, but it's an essential matter that behind your prescribed duty is Krishna consciousness, and that takes a while to restore our Krishna consciousness. But the principle is sadhana, by striving. If you strive with the right purpose in mind, what's the right purpose? To stay, or to reconnect, stay engaged in your relationship with Krishna while you perform your prescribed duty. Join the activities of sadhana bhakti with your prescribed duty. And at different stages of life, we have different duties. The student has one, the grihastha has one, vanaprastha, sannyas, they have their prescribed duties. Without elaborating. There's differences, there's variegatedness, even for one person, what to speak of from one person to the other person. We have different prescribed duties. What's that noise? Is it the amplification system? Do you hear it? Or it's just me? Rain. Okay. Okay, fine. Stoka Krishna, over by your house, is that river flooding yet?
Not yet.
It's getting up there?
Almost.
You looked? The little stream by the side of the temple, the water is really high. I'd never seen it so high. So here's text 61 with Bhaktisiddhanta's inimitable language. I'll say it first. He indicates there are different categories of activity for the living entity. Mankind live by threefold activities: body, mind, and society. Then he does the body ones, then he does the mind ones, and then he does the society ones. It's interesting, the society ones. Marrying. practicing reciprocal relationship between the king and the subject, practicing brotherhood, attending at sacrificial meetings, offering oblations, digging wells, tanks, etc. for the benefit of the people, maintaining one's relations, practicing hospitality, observing proper civic conduct, showing due respect to others, are the various social activities. When these acts are performed for one's selfish enjoyment, they are called karmakanda. When the desire for attainment of freedom from activity by knowledge underlies these actions, they are termed jnana yoga or karma yoga. And when these activities are managed to be performed in this way, that is conducive to our endeavor for attainment of bhakti, they are called Gona Bhakti Yoga, i.e. the subsidiary devotional practices. But only those activities that are characterized by the principles of pure worship are called bhakti propter. My meditation is practiced in every act when bhakti proper is practiced with in due time, regulated sadhana, while performing the subsidiary devotional activities in one's intercourse with the ungodly people of this world. In such position, a jiva does not become apathetic to Godhead, even by performing those worldly activities. This constitutes the practice of looking inward, namely, turning towards one's real self, as in Ishopanishad, and he cites Ishavashamidam Sarvam. The commentator says in this regard, Tena, Isha Chaktena, Vistritena, the real significance being that if whatever is accepted be received as favor vouchsafed by the Supreme Lord, the worldly activity will cease to be such and will turn into service of Godhead, bhakti. So Ishavasya, first verse, Ishopanishad, says, Kurvan evaha karmani, karma lipyate nare. New paragraph. If the worldly acts are performed in the above manner, one does not get entangled in karma, even in hundreds of years of worldly life. The meaning of these two mantras, from the jnana point of view, is renouncement of the fruits of one's worldly actions, but from the bhakti point of view, they mean the attainment of Krishna's favor, parentheses, prasadam, by their transfer to his account. In this method, which is the path of archana, you should do your duties of the world by the meditation of worshiping Godhead thereby. Brahma cherishes the desire for creation in his heart. If that creative desire is practiced by conjoining the same with the meditation of obeying therein the command of the Supreme Lord, then it will be a subsidiary spiritual function, gona dharma, being helpful for the growth of the disposition for the service of the divinity, capital D, God, by reasons of its characteristic of seeking the protection of Godhead. It was certainly proper to instruct Brahma in this manner. There is no occasion for such instruction in the case of a jiva in whom the spontaneous aversion for entities other than Krishna manifests itself on his attainment of the substantive entity of spiritual devotion. Bhava. What was that last sentence? For persons who are on the Bhava Bhakti platform, they don't need this kind of instruction. For the rest of us that are serious about being under Krishna's protection, it's totally relevant. So it's instruction for a sadhaka. Now, Brahma has gone beyond the sadhana stage. He's at this stage of seeing the Supreme Lord and realizing the truths, Krishna Tattva, he has become well acquainted with the ocean of truth in Bhaktisiddhanta's language, and he expresses it very, very beautifully in these prayers. But still he has this apprehension. So he's endowed with Shrishti Shakti, the Lord's potency for creation. He's got this impetus to create. He's ready to go. And we may have some impetus to do something, may not be create a universe impetus, but something. Well, think of your particular profession. May not be, you're really, you may not really like it, but you studied hard, so now it's a means of maintaining yourselves or whatever it is, however you got there. And there's abilities and propensities, and you use them in service to Krishna in these threefold ways: body, mind, and social, or the interaction with other beings. And there's activities in each category. When those activities are joined with the activities of sadhana that's intended for connecting oneself with Krishna, not just the behavior, but the consciousness of connecting oneself, the soul, with Krishna, the Supreme Self, the Supreme Soul, that consciousness helps elevate the contact with matter, the object of the senses outside through the material senses, in devotion. So the body becomes the gold-plated box. The body can act in a spiritual way. Prabhupada's explanation of this gold-plated thing is, therefore, when spiritual persons leave their body is considered spiritual, and therefore they're placed in samadhi, and other bodies are burned because one of the reasons is attachment of the soul to the body means the soul may linger around the dead body and not be released, so as to allow the soul to be released to move on to the next situation, so the body is burned. It's one of the reasons. But for the spiritualized body, there's not an attachment to the body. It's the opposite, no attachment to the body, but the body can act in a spiritual way just by touch of some spiritual personality, or even the sight of a spiritual personality. One can become incredibly benefited. So all of that is on the topic of why I don't like the word balance. Because it's like it's secular. It lends to... Now, I understand when people say that the word balance, what they mean, but I can't help but all this blah blah thing about, it's really one thing. If you're Krishna conscious, it's not about balance. If you're striving for Krishna consciousness, it's not about balance. It may be about time management, but then call it time management, don't call it a balance. The balance is you just do everything for Krishna, then it's all one thing. So how do you manage your time for Krishna? So I got that off my chest. So I had just a few things to say about time management. And one of them is one of the classic things that's said about time management is you put the big rocks in first. The big rock and the medium rock and the small rocks and the pebbles and the sand. Which goes in first? Everything can fit. What goes in first? The big rock goes first, and then if you do it that way, everything fits in. And if you put the sand in first, everything isn't going to fit in. or the small pebbles and small rocks and medium rocks, and then there's no room for the big rock. You may have to, jiggle things around a little bit so it all fits in. Put in the big rock first, but it all fits in. So the glass jar that you fit everything in is your day, or your week, or your month, or your year, or your life, and the big rock goes in first. So a major feature of time management is make sure you know what the big rock is, and you put the big rock in first. You establish priorities. We do it subconsciously, or unintentionally or intentionally. We have our priorities. And for a person who wants to be Krishna conscious, their priority is their sadhana, the core, upon which everything else rests. The spiritual well-being is the core upon which material well-being rests, and we don't compromise it. It's the priority. It's the big rock. And then you can, once you know what you're clear what your big rock is, you can then start deciding or making a schedule for yourself. Best if you do it literally, make a schedule for yourself. If not, otherwise, at least in your mind, you identify how much time I need for the different activities of my life. I call it blocks of time. So much time that you need, same, for the body. How much time does it take to do the body things? How much time does it take to do the cooking things? Or how much time does it take to do your homework? Or how much time does it take to be in the office? Or how much time does it take to, and you make a schedule that has blocks of time. And, we often say, I don't have enough time. But part of the problem is we don't manage our time well, and that's why we don't have enough time. And part of the problem is because we don't manage our time well, if you don't use it wisely, good chance you'll misuse it with things that are time wasters. And I don't know if anybody can volunteer and say, there's no activity in the course of my day that's a time waster. We all do something or another, or multiple things, whatever they might be, our little favorite varieties of time wasters. I won't name them. We all have our varieties of time wasters. I'll give one example, just because I did this recently for the college presentation that I've been making, one of them that I've been making at the universities this semester. And on narcissism, one of the things that they explain, the researchers on narcissism, is that narcissist mentality is me-centeredness, and one of the things that helps support me-centeredness is a overuse of digital devices. And the research shows that there's a neurotransmitter called dopamine. It sounds like, very poetic, dopamine, that it helps people become addicted. When people are alcoholics or drug addicts or gambling addicts, all those varieties of addiction, there's a neurotransmitter involved that's called dopamine, and it helps you become addicted. It's part of the addiction problem. So they have studied the people that are using their digital devices, and they get a like on their Facebook, or they get a text message from a friend, and the neurotransmitter dopamine spikes. And so my experience is, traveling, seeing how people conduct themselves, they have not just one, they have two, they have three, they have 4 devices that they're, even when they're in airplane mode, they're like, they're going. What to speak of sitting in the lounge before the departures of the planes. They're like, anyway, without elaborating. And as a result, their interaction with other people is either they're just absent, even they're present, or the relationships are very shallow. It's how it irritates me a lot. That you see people, 2 people, 3 people, a group of people, they're walking down the street together, and they're all got their, they're doing with their thumbs, or they're doing with their ear, and they're doing another one with their thumb. And they're just, they're not with each other at all. They're friends, but they don't, anyway. And it's so common. And then they stop and hold up their phone and take a selfie with their friend. It's another, and it's not just America, it's, it's all over the place. It's all over the place. Anyway. So being moderate, exactly as Krishna said, so it's not use of digital devices is intrinsically bad, but it's easy to get lost in something that's a time waster. Something that becomes a facility becomes an addiction. You're hooked. You can't, I gotta go do this or that. In making this presentation, I've had students come to me in tears, saying, "You don't know what it's like to be a millennial." I have no time for myself. I'm so busy with my Facebook, and I'm so busy answering email messages and text messages, I don't have time for anything. I'm doing terrible in my studies, and I'm just so depressed. Honest. So, utilization of something that's good is good. And then, time management is you do something that's good, and then you move on to the next something, and then you move on to so blocks of time. So it doesn't become, a time waster, or worse. So, and when, let's say, in temples, when it's Rath Yatra time or Janmashtami time, tons and tons of service. Or in the workplace, when there's a project that's nearing completion and there's tons and tons of last-minute stuff that has to be done. Or your school, and you have exams and something. So it's really easy to get, have the big rock not even go in. And what happens? Your mind becomes mush, your spiritual strength goes down, and you get irritated and agitated, and you become less effective. Certainly at time management and at life management, and being able to engage with the material in such a way that it's becomes spiritualized. If your sadhana, if the big rock doesn't go in. So an essential part of making choices about balancing the spiritual and the spiritual, or the temporary and the eternal soul, is make sure the big rock goes in first. And one of the best ways to make sure the big rock goes in first is early in the morning. Because you try to do it some other time of the day, it's not the same quality, and it often just evaporates, and then it's too late. Then you try to do it late at night, and it's crummy, and you fall asleep. And then you have to make it up the next day, and you lament, and all those other things. So, regulation. And regulation isn't always possible because of circumstances of life. But if you make it a priority, and genuinely a priority, and the commitment, between yourself and Krishna, then it's far more manageable. The managing the high pressure circumstances becomes much easier because there's a commitment, a sustained commitment that this is how I organize my life. This is how I use my time. And when you're, last thing, as one becomes spiritually advanced, one of the, Prabhupada speaks about this, time, for the materialist, time is money. Everyone, I ask them in China, do you have this expression? Yes, time is money. It's not just a Western thing. Time is money. For a devotee, time is an opportunity for Krishna's service that you can't buy back with any amount of money. time is very precious. And so you don't hoard it or use it in a miserly way, but you deploy it in a very careful way. It's the proper use of time enables you to get closer to Krishna. It's the life of a devotee as opposed to one who's not a devotee. Each day that's of a non-devotee that passes is another day closer to death. Prabhupada would like to speak about this. When we celebrate somebody's 1 year old, it's 1 year dead. They're that much closer to death. Another way of saying the same. So, but for a devotee, the passage of time is an opportunity to engage in service to Krishna. It's very valuable. So, each person is different according to our spiritual trajectory or a stage of spiritual development. So what one person can do or needs to do to be in this strong position, according to their position, according to their level of spiritual elevation, their need may be different, their time parsing or blocks of time may be divided in a different way, but the principle remains the same. And we should be vigilant towards nivriti, vigilant towards progressively decreasing involvement with the temporary or the material side and increasing the direct devotional side. Now, if you're Lord Brahma, you can't really do that. You have to build half the universe every day. Wake up in the morning, Brahma wakes up in the morning and half the universe is dissolved. So he has to reconstruct it for his whole lifetime, even when he's old. He has to do it every day. And there are some things that in our lives we need to do every day, like bathing and brushing our teeth and certain bodily functions we need to do on a daily basis for the duration of this life. But some other things are not essential, and when they're not essential, we may do them anyway, or we may do without them, depending upon the circumstance of your life. And we're looking progressively to diminish. Material life is accumulate, and spiritual life is, let me see how I can diminish. Or in the language of Rishabdev, tapodivyam, transcendental tapa. Austerity, not so that it hurts, but austerity so that we don't get unnecessarily involved in matter and maintaining matter and worrying about all of our stuff, because we got so much stuff. There's one devotee who lived in our ashram for some time, disciple of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, really nice devotee. He knew that he had a tendency to accumulate stuff. And so he had an annual ritual. It was a spring cleaning kind of thing. He took all his stuff, put it in the middle of the room, scratched his head and figured out which thing can I do without? And then he'd discard some of those things, put his stuff back, and it was an annual thing that he did, get rid of some stuff. Because I really don't need it. And if it's something that you really need, then you're using it, and that's a sign that you need it. American society, if you have stuff and you don't use it, you get rid of storage space and put it in the storage space. And then you accumulate it again as another storage space, and whatever, people do. But a devotee considers, what don't I need? And even before getting something that you think you may need, you think twice, thrice, some number of times. Impulsive buying and shopping is not part of a devotee culture. It's part of the material culture. It keeps the economy going. Consumer economics. And ours is spiritual economics. On the material side, we consider, do I need this in service to Krishna? And if so, let me think about it carefully. And then go ahead, and you may get one, but you don't need 5. You know what I mean? You minimize involvement with matter, and that which you do have interaction with, it's for Krishna service. And that's an important aspect of the balance between material and spiritual life. Keep the material side or the temporary aspects what you need. Maybe some, your kitchen supplies in case, whatever, but, keep it simple. Okay, there's some principles on this topic. Let's see if there's any discussion. Balancing material and spiritual. Yeah.
So, question. Can anyone in a human form in life could really say that they don't have time to do good things?
Don't have time to do a good thing?
Or good things, whether they're atheists or what?
Good things? Good things?
Something good. You said leaving out spiritual things.
Giving up spiritual things?
No, leaving out spiritual things, because there are a lot of atheists there who don't believe in good things.
Well, a response to your comment, it's a quick comment question. There's a space for a billboard on the other side of the Holland Tunnel. You leave New York City to going to New Jersey, and there's a couple of really big billboards. And one that was there for a month was a big billboard that says, "Commit a random act of kindness." Like, commit a crime or commit a sin. Commit a random act of kindness. There's always time for committing a random act of kindness. Yes?
Maharaj, you said about our big blocks or big rocks.
Yeah.
Go first, and you said the sadhana is a priority.
Yeah.
Where does the temple services, like cleaning the temple or keeping the temple up to date, falls in that category?
Well, it's not the big rock. It's an important rock, but it's not the big rock. The big rock is what you do every morning. So what you do at the temple may be daily, depending upon circumstances of life. But it's not the big rock, because supposing whatever it is, supposing you become ill, you're going to maintain your sadhana first before you go up to the temple and do the cleaning or whatever the service is. So it's important, but it's not the big rock. Does that help? Yes?
Maharaj, the modes of nature, those are the governed in the material world. So the modes of nature are so, powerful at work, at larger society, when two people with the different modes of nature, they come in contact, this impulsive behavior is so damaging. So how do we recognize what mode I'm in? Then
How do you recognize?
What mode of nature I'm in, and then try to transcend into the better mode of nature?
That was an interesting question. I thought it was headed in a different direction. Like, how do you handle the negative influences of people that are in other modes than goodness? That's usually where that question goes.
That would also help.
But that wasn't your question. Your question was, how do you understand your own mode of nature?
Because the way I look at it, until I understand my mode of nature, there is a question for me to progress.
Ask your wife. Seriously. Through the lens of Scripture. Or you can just look at yourself in the mirror, so to speak, and the mirror is the message of Bhagavad Gita. And where are these tendencies? Where do I see these tendencies? Samadhamaktapakshocham shantir arjavame. So how much is that there? And then the modes of nature determine our swabhava. That's the language of Bhagavad Gita. Swa is one's own, and bhava can mean different things. In this case, it's our nature. We're impelled to activity based on our swabhava. That's the material modes of nature contact determine our swabhava, which then determines the qualities that we exhibit and the kind of activities and the quality of those activities that we exhibit. So you can understand from those, you stand before the mirror of Bhagavad Gita, the modes of nature chapters. There's more verses in Bhagavad Gita on the modes of nature than any other subject. Familiarize yourself with them, and then look in the mirror of Bhagavad Gita and see what do you see. Or a third is those that are guiding you. And so to understand your nature it identifies what your natural activity and duty is in life. Then, beyond that is dedicate that to Krishna. Far, far more important. If you try to dedicate your life to Krishna, you'll have a much clearer sense of what the modes of nature that are impelling you are than if you don't. Much more clarity in life if you're connected to Krishna than if you're not connected to Krishna. So perform your activities of the practice of bhakti carefully. That's going to awaken your Krishna consciousness more effectively than any other thing. And then combine that with study of Bhagavad Gita. Hear the message of Bhagavad Gita with the aspiration, I want to know. I want to become self-realized. Deeper is, the soul's true identity, but when that focus is there, then the conditioning influences become more clear. And as you go about life, you'll then be more self-aware of what are the forces that are acting on you. And otherwise, the forces are just acting on you, and we're like donkeys. We don't even know what's going on. Like animals, just don't even know what's going on. I would say, rather than knowing the modes of nature that are affecting you will help you function in the workplace or in the world around us, where other people are of different conditioned natures, I would say rather awakening of Krishna consciousness will help you more than knowing what mode of nature you're predominantly influenced by. Because when the Krishna factor is strong and you're with another person, then Supersoul can give you intelligence how to best be in service to this other person, not just like stay protected from this evil person or make friends with a good person, but far more detailed, being in the mood of service to another spirit soul part of Krishna. It's just the whole level of contemplation lifts. It's accessible. It's natural for a soul on the path of self-realization to be contemplating in that way. So we're not there yet because we're still protecting and defending and trying to sort out who we are and stuff like that. But awakening of Krishna consciousness is directly the most effective way of moving about the world. And I find, specifically for householders, I find Bhaktivinoda Thakur's instructions really helpful because he was a householder. Of course, Prabhupada was also a householder. So he understands, the challenge of a householder, being in the workplace and being with people that are not Krishna conscious and trying to get something done. And that, it's not easy. There's challenges, specific challenges. And how to follow the instructions of Rupa Goswami when you're in the workplace or you're out and about in the world where people aren't devotees. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, many places says, these are instructions for the household, these are instructions for the renunciate. In very specific, custom-made kinds of instructions, principle-based. Understanding his audience is not just his generation, but principle-based. A real nice one of many, real nice book in this regard is Bhakti Aloka. Bhakti Aloka is a book by Bhaktivinoda Thakur where he describes in 12 chapters each one of the 6 principles that enhance bhakti and the 6 principles that destroy bhakti. Shadvir bhakti vinashati. And in both of those 6, so it's twice, it has to do with worldly association. What you should do is associate with devotees. What you shouldn't do is associate with jana sangha, worldly-minded people. And he gives very practical instructions to householders in the workplace how you behave, that where your Krishna consciousness is not compromised. Essentially things like, socially, you're nice. Oh, good day, how is everything? The social kind of. But you don't engage in confidential discussions with those people. Confidential meaning, about spiritual value. You're polite and you're, as he was. He was a high court judge and a pure devotee at the same time. He had to mix with all kinds of people. So he knew how to handle the social circumstances without compromising his Krishna consciousness. So the best is strengthen your Krishna consciousness, strengthen that inner core. And then Super Soul will help you understand how to conduct yourself. And read Bhakti Aloka. It's nice. Very practical. Yes?
Maharaj, we were hearing that example of like 3 friends with their own digital devices and their relationships being very shallow because of...
It's not just children, it's people.
Yeah. So, I was thinking that even as devotees, sometimes we find ourselves engrossed in different services and not having enough time for each other.
Yes.
So how can we build deeper relationships?
Well, by wanting to is the starting point. And then, while you're engaged in different services, if you, while engaged in different services, invest in the relationship. Not just task-oriented service. Blinders and no relationship. That can happen. And if it's part of what you do, you may not efficiently move from one service to the next service to the next service as swiftly if you take some time and invest in the relationship. But for people who are busy, they know how to qualitatively exchange without hanging out. You know what I mean? It can be done, and then take some time out where you're not just doing service together. It's planned, where you spend quality time with persons that you do service with. Have them come for dinner or do something together or something. Go for a walk together and do your one of your 10,000 steps for the day. I learned about that one. There's a company in China. If you want to work for this company, you have to take 10,000 steps a day. They got something strapped onto them so they know that whether they do it or not. If you don't do it, you get fired. So, when you're doing something that's part of that, which is your one of your blocks of time, and part of your blocks of time can be, I want to invest in relationships time, or it can be exercise time, walking, whatever. When you have the the desire, the hankering, then you find a way within the busy life that you have. Look, here you are. Because there's a commitment. And so here you are. So there's time. You just use time prudently. And then when you do, you're really present with that other person. And then you move on to the next. Yes?
Maharaj, material success or failure is tangible.
Material success or failure is tangible.
How do we measure spiritual progress?
How do you measure spiritual progress?
Is it?
That's your question. I find spiritual progress is pretty tangible also. And how does it measured? Well, there's lots of measures. One, it's real easy to measure, or at least for an introspective individual, is interest in the temporary diminishes. Like what you feel you need in order to be peaceful from the material side of life goes down. Now, each of us are different. We have different needs, and someone should not artificially diminish something that, in order to be peaceful, they need. But they should be hankering to diminish. Wherever I am, let me diminish over here and increase over there. So that's a measure of advancement. You're hankering more over here, and the other is diminishing. But this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Litmus test. What's your pH? Taking the pH, the litmus test, litmus paper, and see what the number comes out. And 7 is in the middle. So. From the Bhagavatam, another indicator is, it's similar, but yet attraction for the message of Krishna. Vishvaksena Kata Ruchi Syan Mahatsevya Brahmyatirtha Nishevana. When it becomes attracted. So there's an opportunity here. I want to go, I want to hear. It's like kids. They like kirtan. When kirtan's over, they're gone. But so that's an attraction. So it's an indication. Now another indication of spiritual attraction or spiritual progress is it's not just attracted to kirtan, but then what's the purpose of the kirtan? It's not the musicality of it, it's the attraction for Krishna part, wanting to be in Krishna's service. So when there's a desire to be engaged in Krishna's service, not just the kirtan, and then, no, I don't wash pots, I just go to the kirtan. But, that's not a sign of spiritual progress. Then you have to measure, or say, not measure, make decisions about how much service I do, because you have blocks of time. And I can say yes to accepting more service, provided I can either use my time better or not do something else. Premananda may ask you, can you take care of such and such? And you consider and say, sure. Or you may say, well, that's a big commitment. And the service that I'm presently doing at the temple takes this much time, so I'll be happy to do that. Can you take something off my plate? No, I want you to do it all. You're doing the plus. And not only that, I have another one waiting for you after that. No, she doesn't do that. Presidents never do that. Especially this one. She never does that. So it's just a cartoon. It's not really real, it's just a cartoon. So, or whatever, your wife may say something, so, or a friend may say, or, Premanand wouldn't say that. You have to, but if when there's eagerness for service, there also has to be the capacity, thinking of a couple of people that don't know how to say no. And I had to help them learn how to say no. No doesn't mean I don't want service. No means I have other priorities like sadhana and my family and other things, and I may have to say no. But I wish not to say no. I wish to say, I want to say in a proper situation where I'm taking care of my responsibilities of life. I'm eager to increase. One of the things that I have found, I've said this hundreds of times, well, at least 100 times. As you advance in Krishna consciousness, as your chanting becomes better quality, Krishna will give you more service. And there's always more service to do than you can do. And then you're in some anxiety. I have so much service to do, I don't have time to do. And then something happens. The ability to do that service slowly starts to improve, and then Krishna gives more service. And it's been like that since I can remember. So one answer is just don't chant good japa. But that's not a good answer. The good answer is there's always opportunities for service that you cannot always fulfill, but it's a sign of progress that there's an eagerness to serve and the ability to discriminate what are things that I can do and not do. But the mood of service grows, and another measure is qualities. Starting with humility. Humility and pridelessness. Starting point, because if that's not there, then you're not going to make spiritual progress. Say the opposite. If someone's proud, everything gets stuck on their pride, and they're not making progress. Although they may think because they're proud they're making progress. Because I'm doing more, or whatever it is. People are saying, oh, you're so good. Qualities. Yes.
Regarding the challenges, like putting the big stones in first, like when I have health problems, my sadhana suffers and I see it's a big drag going through the day. So like when I have like health problems, is there something else I can like, sometimes I can't chant my rounds like I lose my voice and it takes some time to recover, or I have a stiff back, then I have to rest more, then I can't do my sadhana in the morning. So during those times, how do you like something else? Can I chant in the mind, resting more?
Well, if you lose your voice, you have to. One devotee told me this story, that they were early in the Hare Krishna movement, they were in the hospital. I've repeated this story many times. They had pneumonia. And during that period of time, medical technology put you in an oxygen tent, literally like this plastic thing, and inside this oxygen. And so that's how you lived, because you couldn't breathe well with pneumonia. Your lungs weren't operating properly. So Prabhupada very kindly went and visited them in the hospital. There they are in the hospital in this oxygen tent, and they were whispering through the oxygen tent, Prabhupada, I feel so bad, I've made vows that I would chant my rounds, and it's very difficult to chant my rounds, so I have to chant my mind. And Prabhupada said, he gave us rule of thumb. It's a really good one. Don't worry, when the priority goes, first is health, then comes sadhana, then comes service. So if your health is such, that's all you can do. You take care of your health. And then you take care of your sadhana. And if you have to chant in your mind, chant in your mind and use your fingers, because they're in an oxygen tent. And then when those two priorities are addressed, then you can consider some service. But some people do it backwards. They neglect their health and neglect their sadhana, and they just, they're worker bees. They like to do things. So that's not, that's below the follow the regulations of Bhakti Yoga. It's work for Krishna. But we're taught that we should take shelter of our devotional practices. So when you lose your voice, chant in your mind, or whisper, or something. But and it takes longer to do that. Whatever quality the concentration is, you do it because you're committed to your relationship with Krishna. Not just committed to a vow, committed to your relationship with Krishna. And then when health goes down and more rest is required, try as best you can to rest earlier at night rather than later in the morning, so that you can rise in the morning and chant in the morning, because chanting other than in the morning is not the same. But try. And if it, circumstance doesn't work out that you can, then you work with the circumstance that you're in. That means the circumstance that you're in means your chanting is going to take longer and be less qualitative. You try as soon as possible to get back to that early rising standard. So the extra rest that's needed when you become ill is best if it's some other time than early morning. Best. I mean, you don't beat yourself up if that doesn't happen, but you try for that. Emina, do you have something?
No.
Okay. You didn't feel picked on, did you?
No.
Okay. Teasing. Anything else? Yes?
Maharaj, there is a saying like perception is the reality.
What's that?
Perception is the reality.
Really? There's a saying like that?
So at workplace often it's so diplomatic, the truth never they speak. So how do we cultivate if you are a guy, speak the truth, whether it is palatable to others or not, but cultivate the habit of putting things in a right perspective, but at the same time give the truth.
You have an interesting way of asking questions. Speaking the truth. I think I know what you mean, but I'm not sure. We take into consideration time, place, circumstance. We don't compromise on the truth, but we want to speak effectively. And speaking effectively, in part, requires that you have a clear mind, and it also requires that you understand the audience who you're speaking to. And if you don't have both of those together, your speaking isn't going to be clear. Or would you speak of truthful? So once again, I would say, in response to your question, the first business is become clear inside. And that clear inside means your relationship with Krishna is clear, and then you're clear inside. Otherwise it's muddled. And then sticking to the truth, then you know how to appropriate to time, place, circumstance, person, audience, how to speak without twisting the truth. It's an art but it starts with, introspection and clarity. Like, you know who you are from the spiritual point of view, not just which modes of nature are operating. You know who you are from a spiritual perspective, and you want to be in your relationship with Krishna. And now you're in this worldly circumstance. And you're taught to stay with the truth. So you have to know the truth before you can repeat the truth. You have to, these other things come first. And then you convey in an appropriate manner. It's not easy, speaking the truth palatably, which is what the verse describes, verse and purport. It's one thing to say the truth, that can be a challenge. Another thing to speak the truth palatably, because that has to do with how the other person is going to receive. And some things we know from Scripture. There's some things that one may just not say. And that's not deception, depends on the circumstance. But not necessarily deception, you just don't say because it's going to be disturbing. But when things need to be said, you say it. That requires intelligence. But where does intelligence come from? Come from super soul. So get your super soul connection strong. And then he'll give the intelligence how to conduct yourself so that you're abiding by the truth. And it's as far as circumstance permit, it's palatable. It's one of the challenges of life. Hey, you decided to become a householder, you gotta deal with it now. There's challenges with anything that anyone does. And so the challenge, both the circumstances are a challenge in the workplace, and there's people that aren't inclined toward road of goodness or Krishna. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Now you remember the when we started, those of you that came late, we'll